My father was a 911 operator in the early 80s and used to tell us about some of the crazy calls he received. The one that made him decide to quit and go back to school was when he received a call from a man who had just murdered his wife. My father told me that the most chilling part was the man's calm demeanor. He complied with my father and gave him a name along with the address, and then shot himself in the head over the phone. My father says that the sound of the gun going off still gives him nightmares. I once took a call from a kidnapping victim who jumped out of a moving car in an office park. She had no idea where she was, and I couldn't get a valid location on her cell phone. This was in 2004, only the nearest cell tower. Usually, I would ask the caller in her situation to start looking at mailboxes for mail with an address on the envelope, but this was in an office park with mail slots that she couldn't access. She was literally running for her life while I was on the phone with her, hiding behind dumpsters and bushes while the kidnappers patrolled the office park. The terror in her voice was gut-wrenching. She had already been beaten, and she was afraid that if they found her, they would kill her. After about 5 minutes of this terrifying call, she was finally able to find a business sign on one of the windows in the complex. I frantically searched for the business address, and the radio dispatcher aired the location, to which at least a dozen officers responded. They found the suspect vehicle pretty quickly, and a short foot chase ensued. A canine officer ended that in no time. The first officer to reach the caller ordered a victim's advocate because of the condition she was in. I had to take a few minutes off after that call. My mom was a 911 dispatcher in the early 90s when I was about 5 years old in Washington State. When I got older, I remember asking her about some of the calls that she could still remember. One in particular was pretty bad. She was working one year on Halloween night, and around 10 or 11 p.m., she had a call come in that a couple of guys were driving around town with a dummy or something dragging behind their truck. The dummy was falling apart, and pieces of clothing and plastic were being torn off and scattered around the city. Being Halloween, it seemed like a prank, but she had a patrol car try to find and stop the truck. As time goes by, more and more people started to call in about it. Eventually, the patrol car caught up with the truck, and it turns out that it wasn't a dummy at all. It was a person. The guys had gone to a store earlier, and when they left, they had backed their truck into an elderly man whose clothes got caught in the rear bumper. The two guys never even knew that they were dragging around another human being all across town for miles. The elderly man had passed away, and those dummy pieces scattered around town were actually his body parts. It still gives me chills. The one that sticks out to me happened around 3 years ago. An 18-year-old boy called in hysterics and asked for an ambulance because his mother was shot. We, of course, dispatched immediately, but they were in the middle of nowhere, and the closest ambulance was 30+ minutes away. As the call continued, we got him to tell us what happened. He had pulled out his hunting rifle to clean it before going hunting the next day. It was an older style bolt-action rifle with no safety and an extremely light trigger pull. He had just pulled it out of the case and accidentally hit the bolt on the side of the table, which caused the gun to fire. The bullet hit the mom in the stomach, who was standing less than 30 feet away. The father and son were both attempting to stop the bleeding, and the son immediately called 911. At first, you could faintly hear the mom in the background saying things like, "It's okay. You didn't mean it, baby. It's okay. I love you both." She just repeated this over and over. The father was praying quietly, and the son was sobbing and giving us all the info as we tried to assist. The sounds of that call will always haunt me. The son just said over and over near the end, "Mama, God, Mama, I'm so sorry. Don't die, Mama. Please, don't die." The mom made it nowhere close to the ambulance's arrival. I was a 911 operator in Mobile, Alabama, the day that Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. We started getting lots of calls from New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast for some reason. I guess they started routing to us after the 911 centers to the west of us started going down. Anyway, I got a call from a woman who said she was trapped in her house on Gordon Street, between Florida and Law. I was confused at first because we have a Florida street in Mobile, and after checking and double checking and not being able to find her address, I asked her what city she was calling from, and she said, "I'm in New Orleans." I tried to route her to New Orleans 911 and New Orleans Fire Department, but I couldn't get through. She started screaming and said the water was coming up into the attic where she was. I told her to find something heavy and break the attic vent out so she could get out onto her roof, but the vent was too small for her to crawl through. She sat down and started crying. I told her I would stay on the line with her as long as she wanted me to. I stayed on the line and listened as she cried, prayed, cussed, and prayed some more. A little while later, I could hear her struggling to keep her head and phone above water. And then the phone went dead. To this day, I don't know if she lived or died. I quit 911 3 months after Katrina. In 1979, New York City. I got a call from a crying child, a little boy, saying his mom and dad were fighting, and his dad said he was going to throw his mom out of the window. I could hear a terrible fight going on in the background, a woman screaming, things breaking, a man yelling, etc. The poor kid didn't know his address. We didn't have the technology for caller ID and would have had to use reverse telephone books. A trace would have taken forever. Anyway, while I'm trying to get the address, I hear a horrific scream and the sound of glass breaking. A few seconds later, the other operators in the room are getting calls about a woman lying in the courtyard who came out of a window. It was very sad. Worst of all is that I'm sure someone else in this apartment building must have heard this fight, but no one called for help until it was too late. That poor kid. Working 911 in New York City during the 70s and 80s was a nightmare. The city had a very high crime rate and shit technology.